my fellow Americans.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
A functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They're 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you to guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Hello, Rebels. Welcome into Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
Welcome to The Rebellion, where we cover the stories that the mainstream media largely ignores. And one of the big stories, of course, the mainstream media has been ignoring pretty blatantly is what's been going on in the Twitter files and the deep collusion between the intelligence state in the United States and Twitter and big tech. Jim Jordan, a representative from Congress this afternoon, saying now we're seeing all of this with Twitter. How many other members of the FBI, CIA, etc. are involved in big tech companies? Well, we just got this newest round of Twitter files that dropped just moments ago, Twitter files number 8, and it is a doozy. It is a bombshell filled with all sorts of PsyOps from the Pentagon that we're going to go through.
It proves that the Pentagon is using social media to sow discord in foreign nations, particularly those with Arabic-speaking populations. We knew this from a report that came out in August, and this is exactly that. You know, sometimes we cover these things and I'm like, can this be real? Some of it just feels too conspiracy theory. And then it's coming out in front of our very eyes.
But you should know,
losing my mind.
You should know on this show that a conspiracy theory is simply a spoiler alert from 6 months from now.
I know that, but I can't get over it. You know, these things we watch happen. We know there are nefarious players ruling the world, and I'm losing my mind. So we're going to get there.
We're going to pull it together and go through the latest Twitter files.
I'm not going to pull it together. I don't promise that.
But we're going to pull threads. We're going to pull some threads.
Ooh, that was a good one. See what you did there.
See what I did. And also, we're going to pull the thread on Ukraine. Moments ago, Vladimir Putin had met with the head of the People's Republic of Donetsk, also Luhansk, and to talk about the nonstop bombing that's been happening as a result of Ukrainian forces attacking the Donbass, which has been happening for 8 years. A bunch of big things are happening. First of all, Ukraine is about to be wiped off the map, and this winter offensive from Russia is about to start. So we're going to bring you the very latest on that. We've got a special guest who's going to be joining us to talk about the very latest in Ukraine. We're also going to be looking at this ties with George Soros and the nonprofit at the heart of the Twitter files and what they were doing to basically hide and prepare for the Hunter Biden laptop story. This, I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. But we have the proof in the pudding that we're going to go through tonight.
And why, again, is J.K. Rowling trying to open single-sex spaces for victims of sexual assault? Because other spaces that allow multiple genders inside places for healing from victimization say those victims are hateful. and bigoted. And so they want you to come there after you're assaulted, and then they're going to mind control you and tell you how to feel about genders. How about that?
Okay, I like that. We're also got a huge UFO story. It's going viral this afternoon. We've got the first interview exclusively here on Redacted with Ben Hansen. Ben Hansen, who broke this story of multiple UFO sightings over Wisconsin in a small town. We've got the amazing video that we're going to show you. We're going to speak to Ben Hansen, who's been interviewing the eyewitnesses. And he, of course, is the host of the Discovery Channel show UFO Witness. So Ben Hansen is going to be joining us here on the show. We have got a jam-packed Redacted for you. So it starts right now. Prower in our chat says, "Sup? Can I be here? You can be here. We welcome all of you. We welcome all of you rebels with open arms. This is the rebellion, covering the stories the mainstream media will not. We are often banned, blocked, and censored. So more important than ever to sign up for our daily newsletter, which we publish first thing in the morning, and we're able to at least communicate with you. It's a free newsletter where we cover some stories of the day. You can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes. It's a great newsletter. But also, in case something happens to us, we disappear."
Yeah, although today you might have got half a newsletter. We had some kind of programming error. And then we were followed up with a full newsletter. So we're still with you. We're still writing. Thank you for that. So
go to Redacted.inc is the place to go. Redacted.inc. When you get there, make sure you put in your email address. You'll receive a welcome email that you need to verify. Very, very important. You have to verify the email, otherwise they'll think it's spam. So sign up, verify the email once you receive that welcome email, and then you'll get the newsletter tomorrow morning, hopefully without any technical glitches tomorrow. Because we only had the first 2 blocks, and someone wrote and said, "Wow, short and sweet today. Must be no news." We're like, what the hell? Half the newsletter is missing. We gave you the markets, but that's not what we normally do. So we apologize. We apologize for that. Okay, so with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the Twitter files. Number 8 dropping today. And just at a high level, this is Lee Fang, the investigative reporter from The Intercept. Now, The Intercept, interestingly, we've interviewed Dr. Shiva here on the show, who, of course, has a lot to say about The Intercept and their involvement in, what they were basically hiding and keeping from only reporting a portion of the story on the backdoor portal between Twitter and the federal government. Well, that's good context. So we can sort of, while we go through this, remember that there may be more. Yes. But we still have a lot. Even if this is half the story, it's a big hunkin' story. Yeah. So, all right, let's dive into the Twitter files. So, yeah, let's dive into the start here. And so Elon, let me pull this up here. All right. Actually, let me give you a little context, because what we're going to talk about today in today's Twitter files is specifically how the government has been using Twitter to create fake profiles in order to sow discord in foreign nations. I know that sounds crazy, but the Washington Post actually published a story about this back in September. We brought it to you when we were talking about the Iranian protests around the death of Mahsa Amini, because at the time the Ayatollah had said the United States is sowing discord with social media for a lot of these protests, and protesters were saying, no, that's the regime being apologists, they're not listening to us. And we presented to you that maybe both were true. Based on this report, the United States government has actually been using social media to sow discord, mostly in Arabic-speaking places. So, the Pentagon, with all of this, has been telling us we want to counter misinformation. We want to make sure there's no disinformation. Well, it's exactly the opposite. The Pentagon is perpetuating information. The report came from Graphica and the Stanford Internet Observatory. Here's just a little bit about it, what it was doing in Iran. The report found 21 Twitter accounts
2 Facebook pages, 5 Facebook profiles, 6 Instagram accounts, all of these with names in Persian and content that mainly did so in Persian and about Iran. Here is just one such U.S. government sham account. Now, this is on Facebook. Some of the users that were mentioned in this report are in fact mentioned in today's social media dump. So some of these have crossover. And in fact, Li Fang mentions this Graphica Stanford Observatory report several times because it turns out to be true, because he can prove it from inside of Twitter. Now, what he also can prove, and we're going to see this, is that Twitter knows this. They don't think that these are, I want to say, authentic Arabic speakers coming from Arabic lands.
So they're fully aware that these are fake accounts.
Twitter knows. Okay, yeah. So that is that good context?
That is good context. And yes, so again, Li Fang, an investigative reporter at The Intercept, is the one who is now dropping this latest round. And I think it's kind of appropriate because, again, Dr. Shiva, as Dean Thomas points out here in the chat, he says, it's about time you guys report on Dr. Shiva. Oh, Dean. We've done 2 deep interviews with Dr. Shiva right here on the show.
That.
We have been one of the only media organizations to cover Dr. Shiva's story. So we got that one, Dean. Thank you very much. And of course, he slams The Intercept and Pierre Omidyar and all of it. So I think it's interesting. I really do that The Intercept is the one specifically covering this PsyOps part of the Twitter files story. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm going to throw that out there and say that I think it's interesting that The Intercept is covering this portion of the Twitter files.
Yes.
We'll see. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to say I know the difference between Persian and Iranian and Arabic. Thank you for pointing that out in the chat. I'm painting in broad strokes here.
All right, let's get through.
Not that I don't know where they speak which language. Yeah. Now, when they say this is about covert online PsyOps, what they mean is psychological operations.
Right.
Right. Do you have any context on psychological operations? Like just sort of.
Well, it's basically a disinformation campaign. It's like
yes, it is. That's an interesting way to put it.
It's like we're gonna fake you out and basically put out fake accounts, fake media,
make you think untrue things
by the way,
our own.
Yeah, I should also point out today, the United States government is actively adding about $83 million to the defense budget for PsyOps as part of a media campaign they claim is to be anti-Russian media. So they're actively funding $83 million in fake media garbage that we don't even know what it's going to be, but this is in the new defense budget.
Right.
So they're fully in on all the fake all the PsyOps campaign, the psychological operations.
Okay.
So here it goes. Twitter Files Part 8. Number 1. How Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online PsyOp campaign. Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter documents show that the social media giant directly assisted the U.S. military's influence operations.
Now, in number 2, he says that Twitter has claimed for years that they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. Here is Twitter testifying to Congress about its pledge to rapidly identify and shut down all state-backed covert operations and deceptive propaganda. So that's just what it says. Like, hey, we take this seriously. We don't want to do this. We always, when we identify inauthentic activity, we shut it down and we share this data. We're on it, basically, is what they're saying.
But he says behind the scenes, Twitter gave approval and special protection to the U.S. military's online psychological influence operation. Despite knowledge that Pentagon propaganda accounts used covert identities, Twitter did not suspend many for around 2 years or more. Some still remain active. So some are active now.
So in 2017, he says, a CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command official, sent Twitter a list of 52 Arab language accounts that, quote, we use to amplify certain messages. The official asked for priority service for 6 accounts, verification for 1, and a whitelist ability for the other. So that means, don't block this one. Promote this one, and also verify these, give them blue check marks, because the government's going to start doing some crazy stuff on these accounts.
That's right. So
Number 5.
Number 5. So number 5, the same CENTCOM sent the list. Twitter officials used a tool to grant a special whitelist tag that essentially provides verification status to the accounts without the blue check mark, meaning they are exempt from spam, abuse flags, more visible, likely to trend on hashtags. The CENTCOM accounts on the list tweeted frequently about U.S. military priorities in the Middle East, including promoting anti-Iran messages, promotion of the Saudi Arabia U.S.-backed war in Yemen, and accurate U.S. drone strikes that claimed to only hit terrorists.
Now, we can't read these, but why don't we go ahead and pull them up to show? Because this looks like it comes from this smiley dude here talking about something that obviously the United States wants people in these regions to believe. I think it's also worth noting that in that Graphica Stanford report, it was shown that not only do they do these specific messaged posts, but they also sort of pepper them with local human interest things such as recipes from that region or, wishing a happy holiday or things like that.
Yeah. And just to be clear, PsyOps, someone was in the chat saying, no, you guys, or maybe I don't know if he was talking about someone in the chat. PsyOps is absolutely a disinformation campaign. It's a dissemination of propaganda. That's exactly what it is. And it's been used for hundreds and hundreds of years. Psychological operations. So, in fact, I'll even give you the dictionary definition of PsyOps in case anyone wants it. And when you're talking with your friends, it's tactics intended to manipulate one's opponents or enemies, such as dissemination of propaganda or the use of psychological warfare.
What I was telling you, I was reading a book about Genghis Khan and how at night he would have his military light many fires. So it looked like the army was twice the size. So it looked like there were twice as many camps. That's it's a fake out.
Yeah. Oh, so is blasting, remember just some simple things like blasting heavy metal music to across the desert using giant speakers like we used in the Gulf War to throw them off and scare them and to intimidate.
Who did that?
The United States did. We blasted like heavy metal music across the desert using giant microphones or giant speakers.
How do you know that?
I know a lot.
Huh. That scares me, just the idea of...
Imagine if you hear that, you're like, what's that, Metallica coming across the desert? You're like, I don't know. Anyway.
I think it would also psych out soldiers, but please, let's...
That's the point.
Yeah.
Okay, so CENTCOM, number 7. CENTCOM then shifted strategies and deleted disclosures of ties to the Twitter accounts. The bios of the accounts changed to seemingly organic profiles. One bio, I love that this one used a guy on a boat fishing.
Yeah.
One bio read Euphrates Pulse. Another used an apparent deep fake profile pic and claimed to be the source of Iraqi opinion. One Twitter official who spoke to me said he feels deceived by the covert shift. Still, many emails from throughout 2020 show that high-level Twitter executives were well aware of the Pentagon's vast network of fake accounts and covert propaganda and did not suspend the accounts.
And here comes our best friend, Jim Baker. We talked about Jim Baker many times because he was censoring the original Twitter files. Elon Musk exited him from the building, and it was shown that he had been scrubbing all kinds of information before he left and before it could be published in these document dumps. So here it is. Twitter lawyer Jim Baker mused in a July 2020 email about the upcoming DoD meeting that the Pentagon used poor tradecraft in setting up its network. And we're seeking strategies for not exposing the accounts that are linked to each other or to the DoD or the USG. So basically, they're not doing a good enough job at this chicanery.
Yeah.
Is that how you say that word?
Chicanery. I think I say chicanery. Others say chicanery. Michael Monahan in our chat says, yes, when I was a paratrooper, they used giant speakers with the sounds of tanks. You think about that, you hear tank sounds. You're I don't want to land where those are. There's tanks, even though it's just speakers. They're not actual tanks.
I don't like any of this.
Lee Fang says, number 10, Stacia Cardill, another Twitter attorney, replied that the Pentagon wanted a SCIF and may want to retroactively classify its social media activities to obfuscate their activity in this space, and that this may represent an overclassification to avoid embarrassment. So again, a skiff. Do you guys know what a skiff is, right?
I do not.
It's like a box. It can be a room, but mostly it's like a box where you go in. It's a soundproof. I don't know. Is it like lead lined? Does anyone know? Has anyone been in a skiff? It's a room that's completely protected from like EMPs and electromagnetic interference, and it's like a safe space. And you go in there if you want to have like a private conversation or communicate or not be infiltrated by foreign adversaries. Basically, use a skiff. They're all over DC and the Pentagon and so forth.
Okay, pull up this email about said skiff.
I can do that.
Guess who it says is already doing this? Facebook.
Oh, so Jim and Angela and I discussed.
Hey guys, you know, Facebook's already doing this. We got a skiff for our bad stuff that we're doing with Facebook.
I heard from Facebook
Could we
they're
get
securing
this?
skiffs in DC and for a meeting. Oh, this is how deep they are that they have skiffs at Facebook.
And the skiff is obviously not that secure if it's being heard about by Twitter counsel, but we've talked about how many ex-FBI employees are working inside of Twitter so that they had their own secret Slack channel. So it's possible that this Slack channel or these communications reached down the peninsula to Facebook, so they knew what could be mirror and matched and how deep the government could go in each network.
Daedalus says
Daedalus.
Daedalus. Yeah. Daedalus says it's a secured, compartmentalized information facility. Yes, it was not on the tip of my tongue. It's been a long day today.
It's an actual place. It's not like a super secure drive. No,
it's a place, and it can be
actual place.
Yeah, I mean, like the Situation Room at the White House, I think is a large skiff. If anyone has been in there, it's a big room, and it's totally protected. Then they have smaller ones that you pop into and do your communications. Anyway,
okay.
Number 11, in several other 2020 emails, high-level Twitter executives, lawyers discussed the covert network and even recirculated the 2017 list from CENTCOM. And shared another list of 157 undisclosed Pentagon accounts, and mostly, again, focused on Middle East military issues. In May 2020 email, Twitter's Lisa Roman emailed the DoD with two lists. One list was accounts previously provided to us, and another list Twitter detected. The accounts tweeted in Russian and Arabic on U.S. military issues in Syria, ISIS, and many also did not disclose their Pentagon ties.
So they are detecting them themselves and saying, can you confirm that these are yours? And if so, carry on.
Yeah, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. Nothing to see here. We're fine. We're all in the tank together.
As you were, soldier.
So number 13, many of these secretive U.S. military propaganda accounts, despite detection by Twitter as of 2020, continued tweeting throughout this year, and some not suspended until May 2020 or even later, according to records that I reviewed.
Okay, here's where comes in the Stanford Internet Observatory and Graphica report. In August of 2022, this report exposed a U.S. military covert propaganda network on Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and other apps using fake news portals and deep fake images and memes against U.S. foreign adversaries. We talked about who those were: Russia, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. Who else? I can call it up. But this is exactly what we talked about in early September.
Yeah, China, Russia. So the U.S. propaganda network, he says, relentlessly pushed narratives against Russia, China, and other foreign countries. They accused Iran of threatening Iraq's water security and flooding the country with crystal meth and of harvesting the organs of Afghan refugees.
Now, he says the Stanford report did not identify all of the accounts in the network, but one they did name was the exact same Twitter account CENTCOM asked for whitelist privileges in the 2017 email. So back up in number 7 or 8, we showed you that the government said these are some of the accounts that we are actually working on. And the Stanford report actually had identified one. So there's overlap here, which I'm going to say is about as much proof as I need. Yeah. That was an authentic report. It says the account used an AI created deep fake image, meaning this dude doesn't exist.
They just created this Jason Bourne looking guy.
Yeah, Middle Eastern Jason Bourne looking guy. It
does look real. Isn't that crazy? Like, this is what we're dealing with now. In subsequent reporting, Twitter has cast its unbiased hero for removing a network of fake user accounts promoting pro-Western policy positions. Media covering the story described Twitter as evenly applying its policies and proactive in suspending the Pentagon network. The reality is much more murky. Twitter actively assisted CENTCOM's network going back to 2017, and as late as 2020 knew that these accounts were covert, designed to deceive, to manipulate the discourse, a violation of Twitter's policies and promises. They waited years to suspend. So they let them get away with it, but they won't let other people. They took down the Babylon Bee, which is a satirical comedy website. But they'll...
Bible-based. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
No, I just thought it was a satirical...
I think it's Christian-based. Don't hold me to that.
Well, either way.
Now it says Twitter's comms team was closely in touch with reporters working to minimize Twitter's role. When the Washington Post reported on the scandal in August, Twitter officials congratulated each other because the story didn't mention any Twitter employee and focused largely on the Pentagon. So it was like the story said the Pentagon's doing this, and I guess no one thought to ask, does Twitter know? Does Facebook know? Do they have a way to stop this? Do they like it? Do they care? It was, they're right, mostly focused on the fact that the Pentagon does it at all.
Number 20, the conduct with U.S. military's covert network stands in stark contrast to how Twitter has boasted about rapidly identifying and taking down covert accounts tied to state-backed influence operations, including Thailand, Russia, Venezuela, and others since 2016. Here's my reported piece with more detail. I was given access to Twitter for a few days. I signed, agreed to nothing. Twitter had no input in anything I did or wrote. The searches were carried out by a Twitter attorney, so what I saw could be limited. And then he writes the piece about Twitter aided the Pentagon in its covert online propaganda campaign. So interesting. But I still do have some questions about The Intercept, because as The Intercept, as we know from Dr. Shiva's reporting on this and the court case, of course, is that they only covered a fraction of what was actually going on. And they knew that there was something much deeper than this. And they only covered the Microsoft piece of this story, which was the backdoor access from the Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, who had the backdoor portals to these social media companies. And then only reported a piece of it, what's known as a limited hangout. So that you put this piece out there, it doesn't get much more coverage. How much more did The Intercept and Pierre Omidyar and all of those guys actually know what was going on here? Apparently, they knew a lot. That's according to Dr. Shiva. So why did they not report on it? Like, why did they sit on the story? Like, so that's my question. How much did The Intercept already know about this story and sat on it? That's to me like why I find this so interesting that Li Fang is covering this part of the Twitter files. Like, oh, we already knew a lot of this. Now, that's my opinion. I'm not saying I know for a fact. I'm just saying that's my opinion, and Dr. Shiva's opinion based on his court case.
Well,
I just find it convenient. That's all I'm saying. I find it convenient. And to me, you and I have been around a long time. There's no coincidences. This kind of stuff. And how much of this is held back? That's what I want to know. Like Twitter lawyers we're meeting with, how much of the story is held back?
But we know that about the other files too. And this here is enough to go on for me, because I felt like this Graphica piece that was in the Washington Post in August and September did cause quite a wave at the Pentagon. And the Pentagon was then forced. What did they say in response? I have it here. The Pentagon basically said, we're going to look into how we do that and we're not going to do it anymore. I want to find the Pentagon statement on this because they admitted to it.
Yeah, they did admit to it.
They admitted to it.
Yeah.
And so we know now that this is true. We know it happens. We know it happens in Facebook. Here's a reference to Facebook actively participating in it. And so, it's high time we hear from Facebook now.
So that's the next piece of this, right? So again, Representative Jim Jordan this afternoon said, we know all of this now about Twitter, right? We're getting all of the deep state involvement and collusion with the FBI, the CIA, DHS, and more broadly, the Pentagon inside of Twitter. Over 80 different employees actively colluding and collaborating with Twitter. They said, okay, now it's time we find out about Google. And now we find out about Facebook. And that's what I really want to know. And that's why it's been interesting. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but YouTube recently updated some of its terms of service. They kind of did this quietly. And Philip and our whole team was looking at these terms of service from YouTube, why they suddenly kind of pulled back on some of the censorship that they've been doing lately, and are allowing more stuff to pop up here on YouTube, oddly. And you have to wonder, what kind of meetings are going on right now at these companies, at YouTube, at Google more broadly, at Facebook, at Microsoft, about, hey, see what's happening to Twitter? We better clean up our act. We better get our shit together here. Or they're burning some files right now.
Yeah.
Get out the shredder.
So when the Washington Post published this story about the Pentagon and their sweeping review of clandestine psychological operations, the Undersecretary for Defense for Policy, Colin Kahl, K-A-H-A-L, Kahl, he instructed military commands that engage in psychological operations to, quote, provide a full accounting of their activities by next month after the White House and some federal agencies expressed mounting concerns about this. So it's been more than a month. Now is the time, absolutely, for us to say, hey, Mr. Kahl, what happened with that? Did you get a full accounting? Did you stop that? Are you continuing to do that? And so many more questions, right? Knock it off.
Yeah, we've got a lot more questions.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that what we want to be doing right now? Are we all good with this?
We want to, I mean, I'm still waiting for the COVID files to drop. Like, so this is part 8 of sort of the deep state psychological PsyOps, involvement.
Right. But then I don't want to be lectured anymore by the government about what is misinformation, given that the government is actively perpetuating it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And paying Twitter for it. We know $3 million to do it.
They just can't say those words. So this is outrageous. I hope you join me in this outrage. It feels slightly empowering, but also annoying.
So, yeah, and I also want to invite all of our new viewers. We do this show every night at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We cover the stories the mainstream media will not. We've got a lot more stories we're going to cover today. In fact, the collapse of Ukraine. We've got a special guest on that. We're going to be looking at George Soros and the deep connection with the Hunter Biden laptop story and how they were covering up what he was doing in Ukraine specifically. And we learned that through the Twitter files. So there's a huge piece of this story. And I'm going to also tie it into CNN. Like, how is CNN involved in what George Soros and Hunter Biden's laptop? Oh, it's going to get juicy. And we're also going to look at a big UFO story that is going viral this afternoon because multiple eyewitnesses, police officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, eyewitnesses all over an area of Wisconsin that happened just about a week ago, a major UFO sighting with multiple UFOs in the sky. We're going to be speaking with the man who broke that story, Ben Hansen. He's a former FBI special agent. He now hosts a show on Discovery Channel called UFO Witness. He's been doing some great journalism, uncovering these stories. He's going to be joining us in a second. But first, I have to tell you about our newsletter. Right now, our newsletter is a fantastic, it's a really fantastic deal because it's free.
Yes, that is a good deal.
So not only, it's free to subscribe. Go to Redacted.inc. Just put in your email address, and tomorrow morning you will receive the newsletter. It's like a 5 or 10 minute read. You can laugh a little bit and get some news, get caught up on the day. You'll be smarter when you go to work in the day. You can be like, all your friends are gonna be like, wait a minute, how is Janice so much smarter than she was yesterday? It's because she's reading the Redacted newsletter, which is totally free. So again, free to sign up. Go to Redacted.inc. Confirm the email once it's sent to you, and you will enjoy it first thing in the morning. Again, once again, it's Redacted.inc. A lot of moving pieces in the war in Ukraine at this hour. We're just learning from the Pentagon this afternoon that the United States is about to increase its training of Ukrainian soldiers, which means more U.S. military, mercenaries, and trainers in the field inside of Ukraine and beyond, also in Germany. Moscow overnight saying that the United States and what the United States is doing is putting us on a direct path for all-out war with Russia. That's coming from the Putin side. Then we have this Economist magazine interview with Volodymyr Zelensky and his regime. Really interesting interview because I think it really shows some major changes are underway, and we have this massive military offensive, which looks like it's about to be unleashed on Ukraine from the Russian side. For all of that and more, we want to bring in former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter to the show. Scott, welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
So I want to get into the winter offensive in a moment. I want to talk about this Economist magazine piece. But first, I want to start with what we're hearing from Russia, from Moscow, that the United States policies have put the U.S. and Russia on the brink of all-out war. And it sounds like from the United States side that they're ramping up this rhetoric instead of trying to tamp it down. What do you make of these words coming out of Moscow over the past 24 hours?
Well, I mean, we have to understand where the United States is coming from first. We're losing in Ukraine. I mean, we have doubled down. We've taken the mortgage, the kids' college fund, and everything, and we've placed it on a losing bet. We're going to lose. Ukraine will be defeated, and decisively. NATO will be humiliated, and the United States will be left holding the broken pieces. This is a reality. Now, what does America do for that? There's going to be a lot of rhetoric, of course, designed to shape a narrative. There's hope that somehow Russia can be persuaded to seek a diplomatic solution, an off-ramp to this conflict. And so rather than moderating their approach, rather than adopting the language of compromise, the United States is being very aggressive. The most recent aggressive move is the decision to provide Ukraine with Patriot surface-to-air missile batteries. But when you think about it, the first Patriot isn't going to show up on the battlefield for months. This war is going to be over by then. It's a meaningless gesture, and the United States knows it's a meaningless gesture. You'd have to train up an extraordinarily large number of Ukrainian forces. Each battery takes 90 men on the complexities of a system that doesn't work. Let's just be clear about the Patriot system. It doesn't work. It didn't work in the Gulf War, didn't shoot down any of Iraq's Scuds. It shot down more Allied aircraft during Operation Iraqi Freedom than Iraqi missiles, and it was unable to protect Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil fields from the Houthi drone attacks a couple years ago. The system has an abysmal combat record. Even if it did work, it could not be incorporated into the Ukrainian air defense network, which is a Soviet-era network right now being sort of patchworked with Western systems that are incompatible. There's no unified command and control, et cetera. So the Patriot will go in, it won't work, it will be destroyed, Ukrainians will die. This is the outcome. But from the Russian perspective, it's just one more example of the United States upping the ante. And from the Russian point of view is, to what end? Why does the United States keep doubling down on stupid, doubling down on failure? At some point in time, if you keep doing this, the trajectory leads to the inevitability of a conflict, a military on military contact between Russia and the United States, Russia and NATO. So I think Russia is doing its due diligence by calling the Americans out on this, saying this is a very dangerous direction that you're headed on. You might want to think twice about continuing down this path.
Zelensky and his whole regime sat down with the Economist magazine, which is, laughable. The Economist magazine, laughable in and of itself. So they get unbelievable access in this interview. To me, I mean, when I just sort of reading the tea leaves on this, you don't get access like this unless it's coordinated from somewhere, right? When you see this type of an interview happen, I've been around the news business a long time to know that when something like this happens, there's some coordination that's unfolded, right? There's something, just like that Forbes or whatever it was, the Vogue photo shoot with Zelensky and his wife. So just your take on this. I mean, basically, it seemed like a big PR move, this Economist interview, but there were some really interesting nuggets that came out of this interview. What was your take on this?
Well, first of all, the silence of Zelensky. He was present, but he wasn't a factor. The star of the interview was General Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. He was the centerpiece of this interview, which speaks volumes about the precarious situation that Zelensky finds himself in today. He's always been an artificial construct. He is not the Churchillian figure that that the media has portrayed him to be. He's an empty suit. And now, his usefulness appears to have run its course with Ukraine facing inevitable defeat. I keep coming back to this. Ukraine is losing, has lost, will lose. It's over. Everything's over except the dying. There's going to be a lot of dying. The West now, I believe, is recognizing that General Zelensky is the only hope for Ukraine. That at some point in time, he's going to have to squeeze Zelensky out of the way. And look at how the Russians have responded. They openly despise Zelensky. No Russian is talking about sitting down and negotiating with Zelensky anymore. Zelensky, on the other hand, who is no innocent. I mean, this is a man who took a selfie with Stefan Bandera's portrait in the background.
Right.
But the Russians say he's a man of honor. He's a good warrior. He's put up capable resistance. His forces have fought bravely. I mean, they're saying all sorts of superlatives about this guy. Why? Because at some point in time, they are going to be sitting down with Zelensky to figure out an end to this conflict. It won't be a Western, dictated negotiation. It'll be the Russians dictating terms of surrender, but at least they'll have somebody that they can do business with. And so Zelensky, if you listen to his words, he was all but saying, this is what's going to happen. I mean, yes, he's cocky. I can beat these guys, he said. I can beat them. But in order to beat them, you got to give me 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces. In short, we have to give them an army. So you can't beat them. It sounded like there's that movie Downfall with Hitler in the bunker in the final days, moving imaginary German armies to defeat the Russians. And that's Zelensky. Where's Steiner? Where's Wink? Dude, you don't have an army because they're all dead, because the Russians have killed them all because of the stupidity of your president. And you know this. He basically said, if you don't give me this, and I understand you probably can't, then we're going to lose. And we need to prepare for that. That's pretty much what he said straight up. We're going to lose. The Russians, for the first time, you have a Ukrainian general saying, hey, the Russians know how to fight. This military they're bringing in is very capable, and they're getting ready to launch a big offensive. And we don't have anything to stop them. That's why we need 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, which you can't give us. Therefore, we're not going to stop him. That's my takeaway from The Economist. It is literally setting the stage for Ukraine, the inevitability of Ukraine having to accept dictated terms of surrender. The question now, is it going to be sooner rather than later? With Zelensky, it would always be later, because he is married to this extreme position of, we will only surrender once we recapture all the territory, drive the Russians out of Crimea, and capture Putin. I mean, he had one of his advisors saying, hey, we're going to cut Putin a break. When this is all over, we're going to try him, but we won't give him the death penalty. I mean, what kind of mushroom-driven fantasy is going on here? So The Economist, I thought, because it's a very influential, this was an interview done for the Americans, for the West. This was a setup for the West to shape the inevitability of a Ukrainian defeat. So that's the importance of it, because the Economist, I think you and I share a mutual loathing for the entity, but we have to acknowledge that within the Western media, establishment, empire, it is an influential outlet that people listen to. So when you have something like The Economist, which is normally leaning very right, very aggressive, very hawkish, taking the lead on an interview of this nature to set the future narrative of inevitability of Ukrainian defeat, it's a big deal. As you said, it wouldn't have happened unless it was given the green light from not just Ukrainian sources, but Western sources. British, American said, we need that interview to occur now.
Right. Totally coordinated. That's what it smelled like to me. Piece of propaganda. I think you're right about that. It's really interesting. So Zelensky being pushed out. We even saw over the weekend at the World Cup, he recorded that message to be played at the FIFA World Cup, and the FIFA organizers just like, we're not going to play that video. Like, we're done with you now. We're done with your Zoom calls popping into these different events. So that brings us then to this big winter offensive. So overnight, we're seeing big moves into Donetsk. Of course, there's been massive attacks by the Ukrainians against the People's Republic of Donetsk over the past week and a half. highest number of shells we've seen in a 24-hour period. So Russia moving in to that region. Of course, we've been waiting for this massive winter offensive for the ground to freeze. Where do you think we are with this winter offensive? Is this something, according to your sources, that this might happen before Christmas, after Christmas? And the numbers I'm seeing too, 1.2 million on the Russian side ready to go, and upwards of maybe 200,000 on the Ukrainian side. This sounds like lopsided.
Yeah, I don't know how many the Russians have. That's a big number, 1.2 million. My guess would be closer to 700,000, but that's still a big number.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians, 200,000, I think, might reflect trained troops. They might be able to bump that number up to 500, 600,000 with untrained reservists, just raw meat to throw in. But the bottom line is, from a quantitative standpoint, we're looking at a slight Russian advantage in manpower, I believe. From a qualitative standpoint, it's hands down 100% on the side of Russia, both in terms of the numbers of equipment, kind of equipment, and frankly speaking, the methodology of employing the equipment. The Ukrainians are no longer capable of waging combined arms warfare. They don't have any ammunition for whatever artillery has survived. Their armored vehicles have been destroyed piecemeal. They're reduced to light armored vehicles and trucks and jeeps to move their people around. They have zero survivability on a modern battlefield. Russia, meanwhile, I always laugh when people say, Russia's running out of tanks, Russia's running out of this. Well, I don't know. Those are like T-90 M3, the most advanced tanks in the Russian arsenal, showing up on the battlefield by the hundreds. The same thing with their advanced infantry fighting vehicle, artillery. When the Russians said we haven't deployed anything for this fight, they meant it. Now the real stuff's coming in. I think their number one priority is securing the Donbass, completing the liberation of Donetsk, and then pushing the Ukrainians back at least 100, 120, 200 kilometers away from the frontier. So never again can a Ukrainian artillery shell strike the soil of the Donbass. Once that occurs, I think the Russians then will either pivot north or pivot south. My guess would be north, and the only reason why I say that is that the south is the last remaining hope for Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to be a modern nation state, it needs access to the sea. And Putin gave a press conference a couple months ago where he alluded to Odessa, the major port city, as being the centerpiece of either the termination of this conflict or the resolution of this conflict. So I don't imagine the Russians would shut the door on Odessa. I think they would go ahead and take care of the northern part, taking Kharkov, going to Sumy, I'll butcher the name, Chernogov or something, but securing these territories that are absolutely necessary. First, there's a significant Russian population there. Second, it achieves the goal of pushing the Ukrainians back away from the Donbass territory. And then they're going to give the Ukrainians the option to surrender. And if the Ukrainians take this option, and they're not going to have much time to think about it, because the last thing the Russians are going to do, I believe, is allow the Ukrainians a pause where they can receive new equipment. Once the Russians start this offensive, it's not going to stop. It's going to be a grinding. It'll be quicker than what's going on in Bakhmut, but it'll be a grinding, destructive tidal wave of violence that's just going to push the Ukrainians back, destroy them, and then they're going to pivot. Once they secure the north, they're going to pivot, and they're going to head south, and Zelensky is going to be given, in a matter of days, surrender. Surrender or die. Surrender or die. Literally, that's the only choice you have, surrender or die. And if he chooses not to surrender, then the Russians will kill him and the Ukraine. They'll sweep through the south, take Odessa, link up with Transnistria, and at that point in time, the military aspects of this campaign are pretty much over. And we're at the point right now, Zelensky admitted it to the Economist, there's nothing he can do to stop this. There is nothing Ukraine can do to stop this. Literally nothing. It is going to happen. And I would, to be honest, I'd feel more comfortable if the Russians did have 1.2 million troops, because that is sufficient troops to accomplish what I just set out. 700,000 can give you the north, but unless you destroy a significant part of the Ukrainian military, you start overextending your forces if you now move through the south. But if you have 1.2 million, then I'd say then this is an absolute certainty that that Russia will be able to accomplish this task.
Yeah, what's your timetable on this? Do you think we're already seeing some moves now in Donetsk, right? So we're already seeing to sort of more moving towards accomplishing that goal that you just talked about in Donetsk. Do you see? Are we talking a few weeks here? I think everyone's sort of sitting on pins and needles, wondering when this is going to happen.
First of all, the Russians aren't driven by the calendar like we in the West are. You know, a Christmas offensive, a New Year's victory. Right. They don't care about the calendar. It's simply they don't care. They will launch an attack when they have the resources available for the attack, not only to complete that mission, but whatever follow-on tasks are coming through. That's why we've been seeing the Russians accumulating these resources. And you don't bring all these forces to bear and then have them sit.
Right.
So, you know, and the movement of these forces into the Donbass, into Donetsk right now is important, because once that movement starts, it can't stop from a military standpoint. They're going to have to initiate action now. I think the Russians are going to be far more methodical than people think. I think a lot of people are anticipating a lightning victory. I'm not. I'm anticipating a victory that minimizes Russian casualties, maximizes Ukrainian casualties, and just blows them away piece by piece by piece. This unstoppable force that's just going to push the Ukrainians out and destroy them, and you know, inflict casualties beyond imagination to them. But it's going to take time. I see the liberation of Donetsk. I see the pushing out into the north taking months, finishing sometime in the spring. And then I would say if Russia was to do the Odessa attack, we'd see that take place in late spring, be done by the end of summer. I see this war being over by the end of summer.
Yeah, and Putin said it would take a long time, so I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, we'll be watching this very closely. As always, Scott, great to see you here on the show. Thank you for your analysis, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. We really appreciate you being able to join us here on the show. We're thankful for your analysis throughout the year on this. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. And I want to call attention to something, so thanks so much, Scott. There's a video that just surfaced like a short time ago this afternoon. Vladimir Putin sitting down with the new head of the Donetsk Peoples Republic in Donbass, as well as Luhansk, and going over basically the numbers on the number of attacks that have unfolded over the past few weeks. I just watch like Putin's hand in this video. He's just like, maybe we'll play it twice. And he's like, all right, tell me these numbers. Tell me these numbers. What's been happening here? And you can see that he's like, I don't know. To me, it seems like he's wrestling with something, like getting ready. And I think this video and these meetings that they made public today, I think that this is a bit of a PR move. I think that this is to show the rest of the world, like what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. This massive offensive that's about to happen. I think this to me is clear video propaganda on the part of the Russians to show, here's the genocide that's been happening in Donbass for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
Here's our justification for what's about to happen, which is going to be total destruction. So watch this little interview that he did with the Donetsk Peoples Republic acting head. Watch.
Если брать только Донецк, только со 2 по 18 число у нас погибли 21 человек, 94 человека получили ранения, 460 домостроений. Это мирные жители, это абсолютно мирные жители, то есть и это, конечно же, вызывает очень серьезную, то есть, как бы, реакцию с нашей стороны, то есть и наши подразделения делают, то есть имеется в виду вооруженные силы Российской Федерации делают все возможное.
I don't know. I just see in his eyes like shit's about to hit the fan. Like, we've been warning you to stop attacking civilians, stop attacking schools, stop attacking hospitals, stop attacking churches, stop attacking all of this, and you haven't listened. And this is why we're here in the first place. And there's a separate piece, a separate interview that he did where Putin speaks and he says, look, the Western media will not cover this story. They haven't covered it for 8 years, the attacks in Donbass. They have not. They've ignored the genocide that's been unfolding there, the ignoring of the Minsk agreements. The West isn't covering it. The Western media will ignore this story. They have been ignoring the story. So interesting. And I think to me, that's a PR move. They're putting this out because that's what's about to happen. This is like the justification for it. We also got some new video this afternoon too of what Mariupol looks like. Now remember, Mariupol was like destroyed in Donbass. And remember, of course, then the Russians came in, and we showed you the video a few months ago where they brought in all of the construction trucks to start rebuilding. And so the Ukrainians have still been attacking with U.S. made weapons, by the way, of course, U.S. and HIMARS weapons, attacking other parts of the Donbass and still destroying a lot of buildings. But here's Mariupol. Look at this. Was again a few months ago. This was totally destroyed. This is the new. Sorry, I thought it was muted. So this is, this is all of the new.
How can that be?
Yeah, this is all the new apartment complexes they built in like that 3 months. So you can see the construction cranes down there at the end. They're still building more of them.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. Anyway, just wanted to bring you an update on that. But I think that video is PR move. I think we're about to see shit is about to hit the fan.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, based on facts.
Okay.
Like, I say that, but it's not because like I'm I'm seeing this. I'm just watching this. They release these videos. Something's happening here.
Did you happen to read that article I sent you through text earlier this morning about the Dutch reporter that got banned by the SBU because she wasn't pro-Ukrainian enough just for talking about stuff like this?
Yes.
Like just bringing up, she's like super neutral, and Ukraine was like, nope, you gotta leave.
Yeah, sorry, you're a Dutch reporter. So yeah, you're not going to push propaganda. You're out of here. You're out of here. You're banned. And they've banned all these. Again, that's why if you're like CNN or these other news stations, you're fine to be there because you will put out their propaganda. But of course, Ukraine has taken control of the state-run media, so they've squashed all independent media voices, and so again, they're going to get pushed out of there. We got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about this George Soros piece as it relates to Ukraine and Hunter Biden. Wait till you see these connections that we've now learned from the Twitter files. You've got to stick around for that in just a second. We're also going to talk about this safe space story in Scotland, and now we're basically blaming rape victims.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. Like, we live in a freaking clown world, and this is the kind of stuff that's happening right now. And also this major UFO story, it's breaking right now. In fact, Ben Hansen is going to be joining us. He's the one that broke the story, and it's a really amazing story out of Wisconsin with multiple eyewitnesses over a number of UFOs seen over the skies of Wisconsin. We're going to get to in just a second. But did you guys know that identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America? There's a new victim every 14 seconds, and that's why I'm excited to partner with today's sponsor, our friends at Aura. Now, last year, we had our whole Facebook account taken over. We recently had an email account that was hacked that we had to get back. And again, if we knew about this, if we had Aura at the time, it would have taken care of this. It would have protected us. We would have gotten alerts about it. If someone was trying to use one of our credit cards, we would have gotten alerts about it. So Aura is identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN, password management, antivirus software, all built into one easy-to-use application. You might have one of these services, but if you don't have all of the tools, it's like locking the front door but leaving like the back screen patio door wide open so people can just walk right in. Those who've had their identity stolen are often shocked when it happens. Again, imagine trying to log into your email account one day and you see the password has changed and people are using your information, sending out emails. That's exactly what happened. Occasionally that happens to a friend. So you ever get like a random email from a friend of yours and you're like, I don't think I'm supposed to be clicking this.
Yes.
There's a link in here that, no, someone hacked your account. That's exactly what happens. It happens like once a month to a friend of ours. So that's why you need Aura. They have 4 different instances. They found 4 different instances of my email and passwords available on the dark web. They send me alerts about this. I'm like, what the heck? And guess what? You can sign up for free for 2 weeks. And you can get access to these alerts. So even if you don't stick around and you're like, maybe I can't afford it right now, or it's not, maybe it doesn't suit me. Try it free for 2 weeks. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And you find it by going to aura.com/redacted is the website to get that 2 free weeks. Just sign up and you'll get those free alerts so you can see what's going on. Are any of your passwords being sold on the dark web? Has there been a data breach that you didn't know about because you signed up for like some Bath and Body Works gift card thing or something, and there's a data breach? That happened. Didn't happen to me, but you get my point. So anyway, go to aura.com/redacted right now to get your 2 free weeks. And it also gives you real-time alerts on suspicious credit card inquiries, like if someone is opening a loan or a credit card in your name. 2 free weeks, aura.com/redacted. Our thanks to them. And thanks to all of you for subscribing to the channel. There's a new rebel who just popped up here. Richard, I think was. Oh, here's Dylan.
Dylan Atkinson,
when you
thank you
subscribe,
so much.
your name will pop up here on the screen on Rumble and YouTube. Good to see all of our Rumblers as well. Nice to see the 15,000 of you on Rumble. Nice to see the 32,000 of you on YouTube. Nice to see all of you guys tonight. All right, let's talk about this story. So what are Democrats hiding in Ukraine? What is George Soros, the billionaire, hiding in Ukraine? What is Hunter Biden hiding in Ukraine? Turns out quite a bit. So much so that they had a game plan in place for when we all figured it out, when the jig was up, basically. Now, remember, the FBI had in its possession, just for some context here, the FBI had in its possession Hunter Biden's laptop in 2019, well before the election. Remember, 2019, yes. They had the laptop in place, right?
If we didn't believe that before yesterday, we do now, because Michael Schellenberger published the subpoena asking the laptop shop for it.
Yeah, so we know unequivocally that the FBI had it in their possession. We knew that a long time ago because the New York Post told us that was the case, but now we have confirmation of that.
But they were deplatformed for doing so. Now, at least, that is accepted information to talk about.
So that date is very important, 2019. And thanks to the documents unearthed in the Twitter files, we now know that George Soros funded a role-playing exercise in September of that year, 2020. Okay, just stay with me on this. This is freaking crazy. It was designed, this role-playing exercise, they gamed this whole thing out. George Soros and his merry band of freaks rolled this thing out, designed to hide Hunter Biden's shady business dealings in Ukraine. You can't make this up. Perhaps this is why he's been so worried about the destruction of his investments in Ukraine, or the destruction of Ukraine, because of all the land that he owns in Ukraine and the biolabs that he's been helping to fund in Ukraine, saying that civilization might not survive because Russia is going into Ukraine. Listen to George Soros. I've added some subtitles so you can understand Lizard Man.
Since the last Davos meeting, the course of history has changed dramatically. Russia invaded Ukraine. That has shaken Europe to its core. The European Union had been established to prevent such a thing from happening. Even when the fighting stops, as it eventually must, the situation will never revert to what it was before. The invasion may have been the beginning of the Third World War, and our civilization may not survive it.
So Mr. Sunshine was running a nonprofit group called Open Society Foundation that put on a fake multi-day event carried out by the Aspen Institute. In order to deal with bad news around Hunter Biden's shady business dealings. Let me repeat that. George Soros gamed out a whole multi-day event in which they played out a scenario where if something happened to Hunter Biden that showed his shady business dealings with his dad, we would have a game plan in place with the media to respond to it. Okay? I mean, really? This is true. So Michael Schellenberger reporting in the Twitter files, the organizer of this event was Vivian Schiller, the former CEO of NPR, the former head of news at Twitter, former general manager of New York Times, former chief digital officer of NBC News. Attendees included Meta's Facebook head of security policy and the top national security reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and others. Now, according to the Daily Caller, the training exercise was titled The Burisma Leak. The Burisma Leak. Like, what a title.
Yes, I know what that is. Okay.
The Ukrainian energy company for whom...
Wait, where do I know the Burisma? Sorry, where do I know that? What is that?
That's...
Are you asking for real or are you being sarcastic?
Yeah, no, for real.
Burisma is the energy company that Hunter Biden was an investor in.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
It was his shady Ukrainian energy dealings that he did. So they labeled it right after. It's like, I don't know. It's like having ties with Epstein and then like calling it the Epstein leak. Like it's like
well,
you're
now,
calling it exactly what it is.
When you hear that word, your spidey sense has to go off because you know that this is something that the Biden administration and the Biden campaign did not want you to link to Hunter Biden.
Right. So good, we got this game plan called the Burisma leak. Involved a series of hypothetical leaks during October 2020, showing that Hunter Biden had made more money in his role at Burisma than previously disclosed. This was like the fake leak that they were coming up with. And had communicated with his father about his work there, Schellenberger reported. The exercise was meant to shape how the media covered the eventual leak of the Hunter Biden laptop story and the way that the social media platforms carried it. This is a following from the game plan. This is a following from game plan. They followed it to a T. So here it is. Here it is on your screen. So day one, October 5th, anonymous website, bidencrimes.info, and a Twitter account, Hunter LOLs, begin posting documents that purport to be from Burisma. And it goes on and on. The Drudge Report, day 2, Tuesday, links to the anonymous website, bidencrimes.info, and the site is quickly picked up by other fringe media. It begins to spread on social media sites. Then Fox and Friends on October 7th discusses Biden crimes in its 8 a.m. block, 7 a.m. block. Donald Trump tweets 6 minutes later. I mean, this is like unbelievable what happened. Like, this is what happened, right? 3 reporters then end up covering it, blah, 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 blah. And then, all right, let's go to the next slide because then this is unbelievable. And I want to call your attention to the third bullet point here on this list. So, which is, well, the Biden campaign adopted the policy of Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, and the Macron campaign says they will not confirm the veracity of any documents. That's the plan. Then CrowdStrike announces without further detail it has reason to believe that bidencrimes.info is the work of Fancy Bear, which is a foreign actor. Fancy Bear APT 28 is a foreign actor. So
is that some kind of euphemism for Russia?
Yeah, basically. Like it's a foreign actor, Fancy Bear APT 28. It's like, it's like a Russian actor, okay. Right?
Fancy Bear?
They're going to blame it on that. Like they're going to come out. This is all planned, guys. Like, and here, number 3, this third bullet point here is CNN's Jim Scioto reports an anonymous Cloudflare executive who says that he doubts the CrowdStrike appraisal. Cloudflare believes that no foreign actor is involved and has evidence that Biden leaks is being hosted and run by Americans. So I just want to point out there, like a bunch of stuff there. First of all, unbelievable, right? I mean, this is like how this all happened. And so I was not surprised at all to see Jim Scioto's name on there from CNN. They use him at CNN as an example for this story, deep state mouthpiece.
Of like, who could we get to say these things we need to say?
Yes, exactly. So I wasn't surprised at all because he always is like putting out news from deep state sources, right? He's whatever the intelligence state wants to get out there, go to CNN, give it to Jim, because he'll push out any of this fake propaganda story. They seemingly feed it to the guy who puts it out right away on CNN. Look, here's a couple of examples. I called this out months ago in the end of August when he was tweeting about that Ukrainian offensive that he got all this scoop about that was about to happen. Like they literally gave him battlefield details. Like what a pile of shit this was. Like, no, come on. You're going to give Jim Scioto at CNN exactly what the Ukrainian forces and Americans are going to do in Ukraine? No, you're not. This was a total plant of a story in order to try to raise more money and boost morale. Ukrainian forces have begun shaping operations in South Ukraine to prepare the battlefield for a significant Ukrainian offensive. 2 senior U.S. officials briefed on Intel tell me. U.S. believes the long-anticipated counteroffensive will include air and ground ops. Sure. So here he is before the 2020 election, peddling intelligence state garbage and talking points on CNN's air. Watch.
We are 1 year away, less than a year away from the next election, 3 years after Russia, with consequence, meddled in the 2016 election. One thing is clear from everybody who testified is the President of the United States never expressed any interest in defending the U.S. against that kind of interference. In fact, what he did, he was interested in a whole lot of other stuff that undermines that goal of defending U.S. election from Russian interference, one of which Fiona Hill highlighted there, which was presenting an alternate explanation, an entirely false one, that it was Ukraine that somehow hacked the DNC server, not Russia. So, clear from the testimony that this is not a priority for the president, protecting the election, but also clear that he was moving the machinery of government to pursue something that undermines that defense, repeating a Kremlin talking point.
Isn't it amazing? Like your name is literally in a George Soros backed document.
As someone who will comply.
Yes. I just love it.
I mean, that's got to be the easiest job in the world, to be the reporter that just spits out what the Pentagon tells you to, because you don't have to do any investigating. It's just like, I want that job. I would hate that job, but right. I want a job that easy would be nice.
You just wear the suit.
So you come into the office. You just come into the office that day, and you go over to the CIA fax machine that you have set up in your office. You've got 4 fax machines, one from the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, and I don't know, Pentagon. And what am I talking about today? Pentagon officials tell me, breaking news, I better go down and tell the newsroom, and I'm going to go right on the air. That's how this shit works. It's unbelievable.
He's a Greg Brady. Did you ever see that Brady Bunch where they just choose him because he fits the suit?
Yes.
That's exactly what he is.
Exactly.
He fits the suit.
He fits the mouthpiece of intelligence. Recently, Yoel Roth told Kara Swisher that he had been primed to think about the Russian hacking group ATP-28, right? This Russian bear. This like foreign adversary, right? He'd been primed, as Schellenberger writes about this, before the news of the Hunter Biden laptop came out. When it did, then Roth said, it set off every single one of my finely tuned Russian bear hack and leak operation alarm bells, because he'd been primed because George Soros, and they put on this whole charade with how this thing was going to roll out. Watch.
We learn about DC leaks, and we learn about the intersection between APT-28, a unit of Russian military intelligence, a hacking group. And so the morning of the Hunter Biden story in the New York Post happens, and it was weird, right? We didn't know what to believe. We didn't know what was true. There was smoke. And ultimately for me, it didn't reach a place where I was comfortable removing this content from Twitter. But it set off every single one of my finely tuned APT-28 hack and leak campaign alarm bells.
Because they primed you for it. It set off my finely tuned. They told you what to think.
But now that we have seen his email behavior extensively, I don't buy that. Mm-hmm. He seemed very willing to do whatever Uncle Sam wanted him to do. Do this. Okay.
Right.
Jump. How high?
What do I need to do? I'll do anything for you. Yes.
So that's nice of him to say about himself in hindsight. But I don't feel like his behavior, I think that he has a disconnect from himself.
So we learned today something really interesting. We learned today that COVID vaccines were being tested at biolabs in Ukraine. Let me repeat that. Redacted has learned from a trusted source that COVID vaccines were being tested at biolabs in Ukraine. Biolabs that Hunter Biden was intimately familiar with. As Redacted reported months ago here on this program, Hunter Biden was involved in funding those biolabs in Ukraine.
Biolabs that the U.S. State Department has confirmed existed and testified during Congress that they were involved in biological projects.
Yeah, which they wouldn't go much, in greater. Well, for months they denied it. They told us absolutely not. That's a joke. There is no such thing. But then, of course, they did confirm it reluctantly.
Yes.
But now we know, and what we'd long thought was that there was that they were testing COVID-19 vaccines in Ukraine at these biolabs. As we reported on Redacted in 2014, a firm called Metabiota, worst name ever, which specializes in detecting, tracking, and analyzing potential disease outbreaks, signed an $18 million federal contract as a subcontractor for Black and Veatch in Georgia and Ukraine. Metabiota was started with the help from President Biden and from President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his investment firm, Rosemont Seneca Technologies Partners, which he founded alongside John Kerry's stepson in 2009. Russia wants to know, of course, hey, what bioweapons is the United States developing in these biolabs in Ukraine? Turns out some serious shit's being built there. A few weeks ago, Russia officially submitted a complaint with the United Nations to expose this secret. What is the United States hiding there? And the United Nations said, sorry, we can't tell you the truth. UN Security Council votes against probe into U.S. biolabs.
Not into that one.
Not interested. Of course, you'll recall the U.S. denied there were any biolabs in Ukraine at all. The Department of Defense even called it Russian propaganda, laughable Russian propaganda. Shut up, don't ask questions, said John Kirby when he was asked about this by reporters on March 9th.
And on this issue of military biological labs in Ukraine that the Russians keep raising, can you basically explain to us what type of relationship, if any, there was between the Pentagon and the Ukrainian side on any biological labs? When was the last cooperation, and what do you have to say about these Russian accusations?
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, don't write about it. Just look the other way. Don't even do anything about it. So, of course, you knew they'd want to keep this all quiet, right? That's why George Soros put on this multi-day event. The New York Post story appeared to reveal that Hunter Biden introduced his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, to a top executive from a Ukrainian energy company known as Burisma. So they knew about this. They knew exactly what was on the laptop. They knew about the shady dealings. They knew all of it. Less than a year later, the elder Biden reportedly pressured the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor who was looking into the firm at Burisma. And then, of course, most of the mainstream news outlets refused to report on the story prior to the election, and Twitter and Facebook both suppressed the story.
Yes.
And George Soros' tentacles go very, very deep into this Ukrainian story. It's fascinating.
You really brought that one full circle, honey.
I did. That's what I do. Now I have a headache.
I mean,
well, that when you showed the image of like where they had it all laid out like in text, I mean, that is like evil overlord kind of stuff to be like,
yes.
Like have it that pre like what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's almost like precognitive. Like how did they know that was going to happen? Because they knew it was going to happen.
Right.
You know,
they knew that they knew the CNN reporter would report it because we're feeding them the story. So we're giving them the story. That's how we know it's going to be out there on the mainstream media. And they have their marching orders to deny it. And that's what the Biden administration will do. So that is that story. Yes, we've got more stories we're going to cover here. The rape victim story, which is unbelievable. And we're going to look at this big UFO interview with Ben Hansen in just a few moments. Ben is going to be here joining us to talk about this amazing story. You got to wait till you see the video out of Wisconsin. He broke this story. We're going to get, he spoke to the eyewitnesses. So we're going to hear from him in just a moment.
All right. Well, here's some context on single space shelters for women who have been victims of sexual crimes. Recall that just a few weeks ago, author J.K. Rowling opened a shelter for women in, last time I said this, city town I got made fun of on YouTube. Doesn't come out nice. Edinburgh. The sort of last part you swallow, I know. Okay.
Edinburgh.
You don't have to point it out. Recall that author J.K. Rowling opened a shelter for women only in Edinburgh, Scotland, who have been sexually abused. And she was called hateful for it because this is a women's only rape help center. Well, it's clear why this was necessary because another shelter for rape victims in Edinburgh says that if women want single sex spaces, then those women are bigots. You know, those bigoted sex crime victims. That's the problem with them.
Wait. So they were sexually assaulted, and it's their fault.
Yes, this is what we gals call victim blaming.
Okay.
That, you know, if you've been harmed and you seek out a shelter where you are safe there and you don't like biological males in your shelter because you are triggered having been assaulted by one, then that's your fault and you're bigoted. Not that you're traumatized, you're bigoted. Here, I'm going to try to not use this R word for sexual assault because I don't want to be accused of violent speech in the rules around these social media platforms. So I'm going to call it sex crimes if that's all the same to you. I know it's not. It should be self-evident that I am speaking on behalf of the best interest of victims of male sexual crime. Okay, this person, though, is not. This is Mirudul Wadhwa, the chief executive of Edinburgh Rape Crisis Center. She is a transgender person herself and says that women who want female-only spaces as they recover from assault are bigoted. On a podcast called The Guilty Feminist, Wadhwa said that excluding men from rape centers is unacceptable and that women who come to their shelter will be challenged on your own prejudices. So think of this. You've been assaulted. You go for help. You have a therapist who's like, yeah, that's too bad that happened to you. You were assaulted at knife point. But let's talk about why you don't want to, see men in the shower.
Yeah, what's your problem now? Now I know you're a little skittish, but why don't you just go down the hallway to the men's locker room and let them, walk around naked in front of you? Is that just get over it already?
Now, it's interesting to note that Wadhwa was appointed as the chief executive of this crisis center in May, even though the post was advertised for women only, which makes me wonder why write women only if they are not going to hire women only, or if they are then going to hire a trans woman to support other women. It makes me think that that was more of a gimmick to make the shelter make a point than to actually protect women. Wadhwa says that if women don't reframe their view of trans people, then they can never really recover from trauma. So if you want to heal from being attacked, then you have to check your politics. Wadhwa does not acknowledge that almost all sexual assaults are committed by men. Further, Wadhwa says that sexual violence does happen to bigoted people. Just happens. So, it's this is comical that it's equal opportunity.
So maybe you're a bigot. That's what you brought it on yourself. When you were sexually assaulted, you were walking home from the store and you're a bigot because someone saw you and went after you. It's your fault that you were sexually assaulted.
Now, this is a biological assigned male at birth person that's victim blaming. Not too long ago, that was politically incorrect for men to victim blame. But now, if said man identifies woman, I guess you can victim blame. So I just want to tell you and Philip, if you guys decide that you want to do some victim blaming, you're gonna have to just present as the opposite gender, and then it will be okay.
Okay, so if I become a woman, then then I can start victim blaming, and I'll get away with it.
And you're all right. Yeah, Philip, good plan.
I was just gonna say I'm fine. I don't feel like blaming any victims, so I'll keep.
But if you want to,
put that in your back pocket.
Keep your options open. If you decide to transition to a woman, you can keep that open. Then you're.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
Further, Wadhwa says, to me, therapy is political, and it isn't always seen as that. Is it? Though, is therapy political? Yeah. Yes. That what is the right response? Thank you for saying it. Wadhwa is not a therapist. This person has a master's degree in education. People who actually are therapists and say that therapy should not be political. Here's Dr. Jessica Taylor, author and actual psychologist, ringing in on that one, saying to the original point, pushing a political view on a woman at a time of profound trauma and crisis is not only inappropriate, unethical, and unprofessional, but it's selfish. It's just selfish. That's how it comes across. No matter the views of the therapist, it is completely inappropriate to push religious, political, or cultural views onto the client during sessions ever. This is basic training, like Schooling 101 if you want to be a therapist, which I would expect them to know and prioritize at all times. Well, not if Wadwa is not a therapist, is just a political activist who is supporting women from sexual assault. So, you know, by this logic, though,
should probably be invited, or whoever it is will probably be invited to the White House soon for a sit down.
Or something.
Some White
or
House
to
event with Biden.
Break bread with Nicola Sturgeon. You know, by this logic, doctors then shouldn't treat people if they think they're classist or racist until they've dealt with that attitude first. Like, I'm sorry you came in with a broken leg, but let's talk about this elitism that you've got going on first, because you're never going to heal that leg, Mr. Johnson, until you stop being an a-hole. So ladies, go for sex crime recovery support and get a lecture about your life view and how it's your own fault. That sound good?
I mean, so it's a woman who's like, you know, I don't know. She's walking home from the store. She's sexually assaulted. She's at the gym. She's sexually assaulted by a man, right? Presumably. And then she goes to a center to get help about it because she's traumatized now about it. And it's her fault.
And if she says, hey, you know, can we not share showers with biological men?
Yeah.
Then that's a bigoted viewpoint. And she's never going to heal from her trauma until she says, I'm cool showering with men.
Because this person is a biological man.
No, some women, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Decided to put on women's clothing, and now it's her fault. I mean, oh my God.
Yes.
I sit down with my son, my 12-year-old son, and he like will ask questions about what like this crazy world we live in, and I don't even know what to tell him sometimes.
You're like, don't finish the 7th grade.
I'm like, let's just go outside and, you know, I don't know, play some football. Like, I don't want to talk about this. It's crazy.
We're talking about this. So where was I?
You were there after these comments. The shelter issued a statement.
Yes. I wanted to say that a lot of times women who have been assaulted in any way never really get comfortable with men. They just don't. And that is part of some people's life story. Yeah. And it's not for me to say, boy, you're really going to have to get over that and be comfortable being in a room with men. Sometimes you just never do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
Well, I picture my daughter, I mean, my 10-year-old daughter, like if this were to happen to her and someone tried to blame her for it, like that she was the victim, I would flip I would go all man on that. I would flip that. I'd flip the hell out.
I have a friend who's a single mom and has only ever raised her daughter by herself. And sometimes this little girl's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable being around men. That's just how the little girl is. And it's not for me to say, well, in this locker room, you know, people who have gender dysphoria can come in and just you know, show themselves to you. Like, that's not a bigoted position. That's just a little girl who's never been exposed to men. And what we're saying with these laws is that's not allowed. Can't have that. That's a no. That's bigoted. Now, after these comments, the shelter issued a statement saying that they are survivor-centered, but they did double down, saying if they hear a survivor say things that are clearly prejudiced, they will challenge this in a kind way. So I don't know who in their right mind would go there, knowing they're going to be lectured about their politics as they recover. But now, again, there's J.K. Rowling's space that is for single-sex, that is for women only, and they won't be pushed politics on at all. Now about those single-sex spaces and locker rooms. You might recall this video from last year that went viral about a woman absolutely freaking out at a spa because a transgender person was in the locker room exposing their penis to women, especially young women. The video, I'm going to show you a tiny clip of it, but she later scrolls around the lobby, and there are young girls that I'm going to say are not more than 12. So just listen to her challenging the spa about someone who was doing exhibitionism in a women's locker room in Southern California.
Hey, I just want to be clear with you. It's okay for a man to go into the women's section, show his penis around the other women, young little girls underage. Your spa, we spa, condone that. Is that what you're saying? Like I asked. It's so he can stay there. He can stay there. What sexual orientation? I see a dick.
Okay. we say that word sometimes.
What sexual? That's our policy in our house. We have one rule in the Morris house, which is just don't be a dick. Like
you can have a dick.
You can have one, just don't be one.
Behave like that.
Don't be one.
The video goes on for about 3.5 minutes, and she's freaking out because this person was not just changing there, but exhibitionism. The person who had displayed said penis accused this woman of transphobia and said that they would fight this out in court, but they didn't. They went on the lam for 15 months until recently, just last week, they were picked up by LA police and kept on a $350,000 bail. This is Derek Merriger, 53-year-old, assigned male at birth. And Derek has priors, lots of them. According to the Daily Mail, here's just a laundry list of what they've got. Extensive criminal history includes 3 burglaries, 2 convictions for indecent exposure in 2002 and 2003, a 3rd exposure case that he or she is still contesting, failure to register as a sex offender, unlawful carrying of a switchblade, 3 trespassing convictions, 2 guilty verdicts of loitering with intent to commit a crime, resisting arrest, reckless driving, driving without a license, unlawful taking of another's vehicle without permission, and giving false identification to a police officer. That sounds like a lot more than most people do for a regular paycheck, I would say. But the woman who reported this is transphobic. So Derek Merriger decided to identify as a woman, access single-sex spaces, and exhibit herself, and then even, in fact, Slate called this a transphobic hoax at the time and said that the women in this video were extremists. And you hear them saying, yes, that person, it's fine, dress however you want, but this is our space. We have the right to say, like, we have female bodies in here only. They all actually defend her. The only person in
defend
this...
who?
The woman who's challenging the spa.
Yeah.
The only person who comes up is a man saying that's a transgender person. And she's like, that's fine, but this is a women's locker room.
Yeah. He's walking around and going up to little girls with his, with his weenus out. And then he's got all of these, convictions, and he's been picked up multiple times for indecent exposure. Is that the kind of guy you want hanging out with your daughter?
Right. It has nothing to do with transphobia. It has to do with protecting women's spaces.
Yes.
That's it. That women want to go into a space where everyone has the same biology because there is a comfort in that the liberal, I guess, appetite is to deny.
So that's Los Angeles.
That happened in Los Angeles, but the woman in the women's shelter in Scotland that wants to reprogram you after you've been attacked is in Scotland. So this is spanning mostly Western cultures at this point.
Unbelievable. Let us know your thoughts on that in the chat below. Whose side are you on in that story? The woman who challenged the spa, or the guy walking around with his weenus out? I can't wait to see that comment thread, but please drop us a comment below. And
or the self-identifying woman.
Yeah.
With a dick.
With a dick.
According to that lady.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Let us know and subscribe to the channel. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It's very easy to do. We do the show live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Thursday. So please be a part of our great community here. We really love it. If you do subscribe, your name will pop right up here on our big Christmas board right now. We are live right now. Some people are like, hey, are you guys live? Yes, we're live. It's Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday.
Do you want me to pinch you to prove it?
Yeah. Or can you show me the newspaper with the date and time on it?
I'll show you my phone. No, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to see your phone. But, okay, so we got a big UFO story coming up here in a second. Ben Hansen is going to be joining us to break down this latest rash of UFOs spotted over the state of Wisconsin. Unbelievable. They were seen by police officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, and multiple eyewitnesses. And this story is going viral. And Ben is going to be here in the first exclusive interview with us here at Redacted. So before he's even on Tucker, he's going to be on our show. which is great. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because right now, before the end of the year, you can get up to 20 free stocks by going to redacted.inc/Moomoo. You have to go to that URL to get these 20 free stocks. Again, when you get these 20 free stocks, you are entered into a chance to win up to $60,000 as part of their holiday sweepstakes. Again, now through the end of December 31st. The beauty of Moomoo is that it's a great trading platform. So even if you just open the account and you don't do anything with those stocks, you can just let them grow in value and cash them out and put that money back in your account. Very easy to do. Or if you do want to start trading in the new year, maybe that's a New Year's resolution for you. You want to learn how to make some money on the side, maybe trading some oil stocks or some gold or silver producers, or you want to learn about some of the commodity sector. Great. They have a great e-learning platform built inside of there as well that you should check out. So again, redacted.inc/Moomoo is the place to go, and you're going to get 20 free stocks. And you'll also get a chance to win a $60,000 sweepstakes. All you need to do, here's the URL one more time. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. Well, a wave of UFO sightings over the skies of Wisconsin. They're being called the Firefly UFOs, showing up multiple locations, caught on camera by multiple eyewitnesses. The man who broke this story is former FBI Special Agent Ben Hansen. He's the host of the Discovery Channel show UFO Witness. He's got a great YouTube channel, and we've sat down to do a longer redacted conversation piece, which will be coming out in a few weeks. Ben, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Clayton. How's it going?
It's going well, and congrats on this story. So this is breaking news overnight, your story here on these amazing UFOs. So first of all, just give us some context here. How did you come to this footage, and how did you start to put all of this together? I think you've personally called it one of the most compelling pieces of video that you've ever seen.
Yeah, of this type of phenomena, it's pretty crazy. I was led to somebody's Facebook page in Wisconsin, Chris, who had put together a compilation of videos because he had seen something in that same time period. And he said, hey, is anyone else out there that has witnessed these strange lights? And I started looking at the videos. Now, initially, my gut instinct with these things has been, yeah, could it be some sort of a searchlight or something? But this had some very unique qualities to it. Some things just didn't add up. And so I started looking into it. I started talking to witnesses. My research partner, Brittany, and I doing the groundwork. We have police officers, firefighters, airport managers, air traffic controllers. They're all baffled. And everybody just wants an answer. Basically, what initially I guess the ground zero for this particular case happened on December 1st, and
so this is recent. This is just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, and we have Kimberly and Ken. Now, these two witnesses didn't know each other at all, and Kim was with her husband. And you have to understand, this is a very rural part of Wisconsin. It's about 15 miles just off of Lake Michigan, but it's farmland. I mean, West Bend and Fredonia, West Bend has about 32,000. I think Fredonia is a little over 2,000 in population. Little tiny towns, and let's just say if there's something big, an event going on, everyone knows about it. So they're driving home, and they start seeing what Kim described as some sort of a flash of light, a grayish sort of an orb. She first thought was an owl, and it was dodging in and out of her headlights. So they saw it about 3 or 4 times, like, hey, this can't be an owl. This doesn't happen that often. And they pulled over, and they started to see these lights up in the sky that were kind of dancing around, kind of ascending and coming down. And she pulled out her phone, started filming. And what's really, really great about this case is not only do we have that vantage point, but we have Ken, unrelated, didn't know her husband, and he's about 5 miles away to the northeast, and he went out to get his mail. So completely dark out there, goes out to get his mail, and he looks up at the sky and sees these lights kind of, he said it was almost whimsical. They were kind of chasing each other in a game of tag, and he realizes he has his phone and film. So what you see in the breakdown is the two vantage points, which are synced up perfectly. The time codes everything of what we call two phases or waves. And in the first phase, they come down and they stream across the sky from sort of a circle and spread out. In less than a second, they're across the sky. And then 8 seconds later, a next wave comes. But in this case, we have, I believe it's 4 lights, and a fifth one looks like as they're traveling formation, it zips into place almost as if a place had been waiting for it, like you'd see, like an air show.
Yeah.
And it comes into formation, and those ones take, several seconds to cross. So very, very strange. The movements, the intensity of the lights, everything that we've been seeing, we just don't have an answer yet.
So when you talk to the police officers, firefighters, and air traffic controllers, now they also saw it, or they heard reports of it. I'm curious. It always adds a level of credence to a story when you have these people in authority, because they very often they don't necessarily want to come forward and talk about it. They might be ridiculed at the office, but you have police officers, firefighters, and air traffic controllers all saying, we don't know what this was.
Well, a lot of them were brought into it because of the Facebook page, and they saw what videos have been posted. A lot of it was done because Chris, one of the witnesses, had contacted them. We are uncovering new witnesses. For example, we've called at least 3 of the city halls, because all of the communities there to, one of the theories, of course, would be the searchlights. They have to have a permit to do that. And for commercial and do it legally, none of them reported anyone has applied for a permit, and none of them knew of anything going on. However, one of them who worked at City Hall said, yeah, I'm glad you called. I saw the same light. Wow. I saw one of them, though. Now, if you've got these people seeing them for only a couple minutes, every few days, it seems like there's been something, but for a few minutes, that's another, I think, supporting a piece of evidence that tells us this is not a deliberate advertising campaign.
Right.
What are you advertising if you're only turning a light on for a minute?
Yeah, and so searchlights, I grew up seeing those, from like a carnival or something like that, or, you see them in the Batman movies, right? Like the bat signal in the sky, they're spinning around, and you know exactly where they're coming from. And in the video, and I'm going to show the slowed down version of this, I thought that this was really compelling, because the slowed down version of these, as 5 of them, 5 points of light, well, as you slow it down, they start to disappear and trail off one at a time, or not all in unison, which if you're flipping off a searchlight, it would all of that would turn off at the same time, right?
Yeah, and so I'm not an expert in this, and that's why we've reached out to the nation's experts in searchlights. And that's one key aspect, that if we're dealing with like a xenon or an LED bulb, they, first of all, have a very limited distance. And these are the types of lights that will be able to whip around very quickly. But they're very limited in distance. And like you said, you can program them. You can have them run by a computer to do that. But it's an additional complexity that, why would you do this? Right? The way that they slowly fade out as they gain distance, the way that they look like they're almost traveling horizontal. There's no beam whatsoever in any of these videos being projected upward.
Right.
Sometimes you don't see a beam on searchlights, but that means the intensity has to be so great, for you to even see the light itself. You'd have to be right up on it. So there's just so many aspects.
Well, that's why I love the work that you do. Like, even going back to your old show, Fact or Faked, on the Sci-Fi Network, right? It's it's unpacking the evidence here, and so it's very easy for someone to jump on Twitter and just say, it's searchlights. Well, okay, let's unpack that. This is a very rural area. Why would you buy or have searchlights at all? You'd have to get a permit for them. Yeah. There weren't any. City halls confirmed that there wasn't any. And they also don't have the characteristics, once you start to dial it in and look more deeply at the video, that they're not searchlights. So if they're not searchlights, then what do these eyewitnesses think they were? Did they feel like that they were intelligent, some kind of intelligent craft of something?
They've been very objective. I haven't had anyone speculate. We've never heard the word alien or anything like that. But they're baffled because they're completely silent. Like you said, we always have an open mind. We're going to find some new technology, some new searchlight that no one has really been using right now. But in this case, I've told people, Clayton, it's very important that we're very specific, people can't just come out and say they must be searchlights. I need to know the model, the type, when and where and who. Because if this is explainable, we need to be able to filter this out in future cases so that others aren't spending time, or there's safety issues like at the airport. We need to be able to filter that out. And as of yet, nobody is able to tell me how any particular searchlight is able to do everything that we're seeing here. So if we can, and if we do eliminate that as a possibility, this is to me reminiscent of some of those older cases that we're seeing, like the Foo Fighters, in World War II, which were Orbish lights that didn't appear like necessarily solid objects even, but they would dance in and out of the clouds. We have 1952 over DC,
right?
And they were chasing lights such as this. So it's not necessarily a new phenomena, but the fact that so many people are seeing this, right now, and that we can't come to a conventional, explanation is very strange.
What did the air traffic controllers say? Because would this have shown up on radar, or did it show up on radar? Were they in the booth at the time? I'm just curious on that piece of this.
So this falls within Chicago Center, ARTCC, and we've talked to someone who kind of volunteered to help us out there, and they've checked all the locations of the witnesses, the times. They said there's not even a plane here in the air at that time.
Wow.
And it's kind of like, you look at the video and you tell me, like, why are we even researching planes? I mean, these things are taking off a second they've crossed the horizon.
Right.
But we have to check every possible explanation in order to rule it out. And so planes, who knows, maybe if they're solid objects, these things would show up, but they're not getting anything on primary radar data, which is the one that that picks up on the actual signatures and paints the targets. It's not transponders or anything like that they have to rely on. So the weather, we've looked at that too. What kind of weather phenomena would cause this? And I kind of laugh because people who, they're kind of like browsers of information and don't really read. They throw out ball lightning, solved.
Right.
Ball lightning. Do you know anything about ball lightning?
Right. Swamp gas.
It doesn't repeat like this. So, people are going to say what they're going to say.
Yeah, from multiple locations with really stunning video here. But I'll get you out of here on this question, Ben, which is the size. It's hard to tell from the video, but did the eyewitnesses give you a sense of size of these orbs, these whatever it is, craft or otherwise? And you said they're silent.
And that's a great question because, first of all, we have to make some assumptions. We can't say for 100% certainty what Kim saw on the ground level was what she saw in the sky, but it is very coincidental that these Orbish lights she felt were like probably initially the size of an owl if she thought that's what was dodging in her car. But then as they take to the sky, you have to think the intensity of these was seen for at least, I'd say, 5 to 8 miles, because that's the distance between Ken and Kim. It's more probably like 8 miles. We haven't done the math yet. It is really difficult to estimate, but the ceiling of the clouds was about 6,500 feet. So from there, I suppose once we get further into this, some really smart people can do the geometry here and we might be able to estimate. But right now I'm just guessing based not on the math, but I would say these things are no smaller than probably 10 feet in diameter, but they could be upwards of 50 or 100 feet wide. I have no idea.
And then I imagine once you get the triangulation too, when you have a gentleman at City Hall coming forward saying I saw him as well, and then being able to try to pinpoint those locations and times to try to maybe a deeper map between those would be really interesting.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a lot of work because, we're getting so many reports and we just don't know, is this the same phenomena? Can this one be explained? Was there an event or a light show over here? And, we do weed through that because we have found a few Christmas light displays, some known things that are going on. And then we can actually call those people and say, what type of light were you using in your display? Oh, that's one of these theatrical LEDs, and we look up the specs. Okay, that goes 700 feet. Great, that's what people are seeing over here. So it's just a lot of work, and so we caution people, this is a developing story. We're still getting leads coming in. Today is really kind of the first day that it's really just broken free into the mainstream news. And hopefully that'll help us in getting more people to come forward.
Yeah, the New York Post covering it, the Daily Mail. I think, hopefully my friend Tucker will be covering it as well. That'll be great. So as much news as we can get on this, the better. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Anytime. We love to cover these stories here on the show. We're passionate about it and want to get the truth out about it. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate being invited and at least, just the awareness that people realize this is worthy of study. It's worth looking into, and let's try to solve it together.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you for subscribing and being a part of our great community here. As a reminder, we're live every day, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So subscribe to the channel and bring us into your living room as well. We'll see you next time, everyone.